On a seemingly ordinary morning, an alarm came from something unseen. Smokeless, soundless, a school in Pozzuoli was suddenly closed. Not because of an earthquake, not because of a volcanic eruption, but because the air beneath the floor was extremely dangerous. High levels of toxic gases were detected, and scientists confirmed this was an emergency situation. What made the situation even more alarming was the school's location. It was located in the red zone of Campi Flegrei, one of the world's most complex volcanic systems. Measurements showed extremely high levels of carbon dioxide in the basement, enough to endanger anyone there. As a result, an immediate evacuation was carried out, activities were halted, and for the second time in a year, the site was closed. This closure was not simply a precautionary measure, but a clear signal that conditions beneath the surface were unstable. Furthermore, the threat did not stand alone. As the gas levels continued to rise, other signs began to appear around the site. The ground temperature rose abnormally, and about 150 meters from the school, the road surface reportedly softened, as if heat from within the earth was rising upward. Taken together, these changes indicate that underground pressure is slowly seeking an outlet. To better understand the danger, it's important to examine the gas itself. The gas detected at the site is mostly carbon dioxide, a substance familiar in everyday life. However, in high concentrations, this gas poses a deadly threat. Because it is colorless, odorless, and heavier than air, it tends to settle in low spaces like basements. Under these conditions, a person can lose consciousness within minutes without realizing what is happening. So, where does this gas come from? This phenomenon is directly related to magma activity beneath the surface. In volcanic areas like Campi Flegrei, gas from within the earth can seep upward through cracks in the ground, rock fissures, and even penetrate building structures. In fact, what is visible on the surface is only a small part of the vast system constantly moving beneath. To provide context, the area itself is not a typical volcano, but rather a giant caldera formed by a massive eruption thousands of years ago. Within it are numerous hotspots of activity, including the famous Solfatara crater. Because of this structure, pressure in the region can build up in several locations, making its behavior much more difficult to predict than that of a typical volcano. In recent years, these underlying processes have become increasingly apparent. Scientists have recorded noticeable changes. The ground is slowly rising through a phenomenon known as bradism. At the same time, gas emissions are increasing and ground temperatures are rising, reinforcing indications that the subsurface system is experiencing continuous pressure changes. As a result, the impact is now being felt directly by the community. Schools that had reopened have had to close again due to rising gas levels. This indicates that the gas source is unstable and that underground activity continues with no certainty about when it will subside. However, for scientists, this presents a significant challenge. Increased gas emissions can signal magma movement, but they do not necessarily lead to an eruption. As a result, uncertainty remains high. Even when changes are detected, the final outcome cannot be predicted with certainty. Because of this continuing uncertainty, intensive monitoring of the area is underway. Campi Flegrei is now one of the most closely monitored areas in the world. Sensors have been installed to measure ground movement, temperature, and gas composition around the clock to better understand what's happening beneath the surface. Meanwhile, for the residents of Pozzuoli, this is more than just a scientific phenomenon. It's part of everyday life, fraught with uncertainty. They live on slowly shifting ground, in an environment that can change without warning, and under the shadow of natural forces not yet fully understood. Perhaps most alarming of all, these changes occur without dramatic warning. There are no major eruptions or rumbling sounds. Instead, only subtle signs continue to emerge, rising gases, radiating heat, and the ground slowly lifting. It's as if the earth is moving silently, without wanting to be seen. Ultimately, one question remains. Is this just part of the natural cycle of a complex volcanic system, or the beginning of something bigger? No one can be sure yet. However, one thing is clear. Beneath Campi Flegrei, something is happening slowly, silently, but constantly moving.